Now, in a big relief for Donald Trump, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that he enjoys some immunity from prosecution as a former president.
Well, it was a 6-3 ruling of the Apex Court, and it was authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, who threw out a lower court's decision that had rejected Trump's claim of immunity from federal criminal charges involving his efforts to undo his 2020 election loss to Joe Biden. Trump is the Republican candidate challenging Biden, a Democrat, in the November U.S. election. The duo took part in the first presidential debate on the 28th of June.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ruled that presidents have, quote, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution over what the justices said were, quote, official acts, in a critical case over whether Donald Trump can be charged for allegedly plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The landmark ruling recognizes, for the first time ever, any form of presidential immunity from prosecution. The 6-3 decision, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, split down partisan lines and threw out a lower court's decision rejecting Trump's claims of immunity from criminal charges. It ordered the lower court to evaluate which of the alleged crimes in the indictment were, quote, official and therefore immune from prosecution, and which were, quote, unofficial and potentially criminal. The Supreme Court's slow handling of the immunity case has already helped Trump by making it unlikely that any trial on charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith could be completed before the 2024 election.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
Smith indicted Trump in August of last year. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Trump's actions alleged in the indictment include efforts to fire and replace officials at the Justice Department, pressing Vice President Mike Pence to illegally reject state electoral votes, and working with state officials to concoct fraudulent slates of electors to support him.
USA! USA!
The special counsel also accused Trump of fueling his supporters' violent efforts to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. But the Supreme Court ruled that a president has, quote, absolute immunity for decisions governing appointments within the executive branch, including at the Justice Department, and that his communications with the vice president and with his supporters could be viewed as official acts. Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor excoriated the majority decision in a dissent, writing, quote, today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle, foundational to our Constitution and system of government, that no man is above the law. She added that the majority believed Trump should enjoy immunity from prosecution, quote, and so it invents an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity that puts the president above the law. Donald Trump praised the decision, writing on social media, quote, big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American. The 78-year-old is the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted, as well as the first former president convicted of a crime. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said in a statement, quote, today's ruling doesn't change the facts, so let's be very clear about what happened on January 6th. Donald Trump snapped after he lost the 2020 election and encouraged a mob to overthrow the results of a free and fair election.
Today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
Now for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani from New York told us what the Supreme Court ruling means for Trump's criminal cases. Listen to this.
The ruling grants the former president immunity from prosecution for official acts committed while in office, but not for unofficial acts. This means that Trump may still face prosecution for actions deemed unofficial, such as those related to the 2020 election interference case. The case will now go back to a lower court for further proceedings. The work of figuring out how to proceed will ultimately fall to U.S. District Judge Atania Chutkan, who would preside over Trump's trial. Donald Trump still could face a trial, but the fact remains that it's almost impossible for it to happen before the November election.
We also asked Susan about the implications of this ruling on future presidents and the separation of powers. This is what she had to say on that.
The ruling sets precedent for presidential immunity, which liberals say may embolden future presidents to commit crimes while in office, as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson noted. However, the ruling also emphasizes the importance of separation of powers and the need for checks and balances on presidential power. The concurring opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas highlights concerns about the appointment of special counsels and the potential violation of constitutional structure. The case has put the national spotlight on the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority that includes 3 justices former President Donald Trump appointed. The court handed Trump an election year boost when it ruled back in March that Colorado could not kick him off the ballot.
All right, to discuss this further, we now have with us Stephen Golub, lawyer and political analyst, joining us live from California. So thank you so much for joining us on World DNA. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Now, sir, of course, the decision says presidents have immunity to official acts, but not all acts are official. So how do you feel the courts will now differentiate going forward? Also, we heard what Joe Biden had to say. He says that this ruling makes it so that the president has absolutely no limits to what they can do. What's your assessment of this?
Well, it's a very significant decision and unfortunately a very bad decision in terms of presidential, vastly expanding presidential prerogatives. For one thing, official acts can be defined very broadly, and the court seems to be defining official acts very broadly, so that the president has great immunity, not just in terms of what Trump may have done previously that he's on trial for, but going forward. In Justice Sotomayor's dissent, she alleges that as long as it seems somehow to fall arguably within the realm of official acts, a president can take a payment for giving someone a pardon or can have a military unit assassinate a political opponent. Is that an extreme characterization? Maybe, but it's not coming from me. It's coming from a distinguished jurist, and it really does raise very severe concerns about a concept that just a year ago most legal commentators thought would never get off the ground, this notion of absolute immunity against for criminal liability regarding official acts. It really is a reversal of what a lot of legal precedent and legal assumptions and jurisprudence had previously indicated.
Mr. Golub, you mentioned precedent. I wanted to just take it further from there. This is something that the president said, that this sets a dangerous precedent. If Trump comes to power in November, what kind of impact do you feel this ruling would have on Trump's campaign leading up to November and in case he does come to power?
Well, in terms of the campaign leading up to November, it helps him a lot. Originally, he was supposed to be on trial on March 4th for these very charges. The Supreme Court blocked that and is now in effect, as your excellent introduction indicated, really forestalls the trial until after November, well after November. And of course, if he's reelected, if he's put back in office, then he could simply order the Department of Justice to dismiss charges against him, so he'll be completely off the hook. Beyond that, it does open up all sorts of doors for presidential actions that otherwise might be considered illegal and prosecutable. But that now, as long as there's some kind of a notion that they're related to official activity, such as even if it's consulting with Department of Justice officials, to pick up a point that Chief Justice Roberts made in his majority decision, even if he's consulting with Department of Justice officials about illegally interfering with the election, it could be considered a matter that falls within his official duties and therefore could not be prosecuted.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Golub, for joining us and sharing all your insights. Of course, there is going to be a line will need to be drawn between what is official and what is not official. The lower courts will be ruling in on that. We will be tracking that closely as that comes in. That was Stephen Golub, lawyer and political analyst, joining us from California. Always a pleasure having you on World DNA.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.